Hello everybody, welcome to WhatCulture Gaming. I'm Scott, joined by Josh.
Hello, Scott.
Josh, my friend, Nintendo's newest console has leaked. This is detailed over on Reset Era by a well-known hackerman, well-known leaker man called, I'm going to call him Series M, but it might be Skyers M. And apparently he's well-known in the industry for leaking all sorts of different patterns and different things in regards to different consoles. And his latest find is the Nintendo Aula, or at least what he's, or what it's being referred to as the Aula. And this was, data mined and detailed over on Reset Era, which is kind of interesting because one of the biggest things for this is that it will support 4K resolution when it's, when it's docked onto a TV. It'll have an OLED screen when you're playing handheld. And it made me think of an older quote from Sir Kentoto, who was one of the games analysts talking to gamesindustry.biz about the way that Nintendo could go in 2021. And he was also the guy that initially predicted the Pro this time last year, and obviously it didn't come true last year. So he was addressing that, and he said, well, look, obviously it didn't happen, but I totally think it's going to happen. And he was saying that he predicts for 2021 a beefed up 4K device coming to Nintendo's next financial year, and said that the Switch is just a word. So if they're going with something, the Aula seems like a weird name for it, but whatever. But either way, you've got a 4K capable, when docked Switch, an OLED screen. Apparently it also has substantially better cooling and better battery life. So the overall comparison that Sires M makes at the end is between the PS4 Pro and the PS4, or between something like the DSi to the DS. What's your thoughts on the way that they're taking this sort of half-step switch?
Well, Scott Tailford, I need it, and I need it right now, to be honest. Every single time this thing gets apparently leaked, or it's rumored to be revealed, this year, I'm sure we did a few videos on it in 2020.
Sounds like
I just want it. I want it in my house because I love the Switch. I love it handheld. I love it docked. And I never thought I'd be one of those gamers who actually plays handhelds because I could never get into them. For as good as the PSP was, I could never get into it. I could never get into the DS, 3DS, or anything like that. But the Switch completely changed my life around. And I think it was that hybrid nature. And the fact that the games looked so good, whether you were playing them on the big TV or whether you were playing them handheld, because I think, Nintendo has always been a testament to art design more or less trumping anything else. Like if you have really strong art direction, it doesn't matter if you don't have the graphical prowess to back it, because you can make something that looks beautiful. That said, I just want a Switch that runs at 4K, Scott Tilford, especially because now we've got the new consoles. A lot of us are getting 4K TVs. We want to experience the crispest versions of these games possible. And I think when it comes to whether or not it should be a half step or a brand new console, I think a half step makes sense just because of how well the Switch is doing. It had one of its best years, if not the best year it's ever had in 2020. This thing has legs. This thing is going to stick around for a long time. The games are still coming. People are still buying it. There's no reason to retire it fully now and to move on to something completely fresh, like a refresh for my money would keep it relevant and keep it updated now that we have the proper next-gen consoles from Microsoft and Sony.
The thing that's really interesting though is that if they're ditching the Switch name, that's the thing that's everywhere that everybody knows. You don't even have to say Nintendo Switch. It's just referred to easily as the Switch is selling well, or I'm getting a new Switch, or I'm getting someone a Switch for Christmas, or whatever. If they pivot away from that into trying to do a pro version of it, but it's called something completely different. Also, it literally is a Switch. You switch between docked and handheld. So if they're gonna go with that other sort of route, then I wonder how much this is them. If they do go with a different name, how much this is them sort of reclaiming the home console market head on, because they did discontinue the 3DS, and then they brought out the Switch Lite, which was sort of saying hey, we can sort of let the Switch continue sort of taking up the market share of the handheld market, and then in this case they could do this big sort of 4K flashier version of a Nintendo home console and let that sort of be the one the home console Nintendo system that they haven't really had. They haven't really dominated the sort of the bedrooms, the living room spaces. I guess the Wii kind of, but not with the games outside of Wii Sports. So I kind of wonder if that's just territory that they've sort of got an eye on, going people want Nintendo franchises in their living rooms and they want to play them at 4K.
Probably. I do think there is a real hunger for that because, like you said, the Wii was probably the last console to do that apart from the Switch, but even the Switch has this cross appeal. When it comes to the naming conventions, like you said, part of me thinks that they just don't want to repeat the Wii U's mistakes because nobody knew what that thing was. It completely tanked. And people, mainstream casual players had no idea whether it was a brand new console, whether it was some kind of add-on. It was this kind of weird next-gen console that existed yet didn't exist, and I wonder whether they've learned a bit of a lesson from that and realized that people know what the Switch is. They don't need to have it called Switch Pro or Switch whatever. They can call it something else. but you've got the identifiable branding, you've got like the look of the console. I presume it'll look very similar to what we've got right now, and that will probably be enough, and hopefully be enough to avoid any kind of needless confusion about what they're doing or where they're going next.
Do you think that, because obviously like you sort of parsed out like the way that Sony are approaching the current generation, the way that Microsoft are approaching it, or Xbox are approaching it, and Xbox's thing is put any old game in and we'll auto up-res it, auto HD, auto HDR, we'll up-res the resolution, we'll do all this fancy stuff. Nintendo, like, I don't think they will do that stuff, but they do have such a legacy, and they do have the Nintendo Switch Online Pass and everything. And there's also, for the longest time, there's been the rumor that they're going to add Game Boy Advance games to that. You'd be able to go and play like Minish Cap on your Switch and something. And the idea of Minish Cap in 4K might be the sweetest thing ever, but I don't know. I don't know if I trust them to sort of do the retroactive, your entire library is upgraded. Nintendo seem more like a company that would just sell you the 4K version, the Aula version, or whatever of the latest game. Like, do you see them going down more of the Sony route or the Xbox route in regards to sort of like rewarding your loyalty so far?
Well, Scott Telford, I learned a long time ago to not make any guesses when it comes to Nintendo and how they treat their legacy library, because sometimes they do it really well and they justify, bringing back older games or upgrading older games or whatever. And sometimes they just kind of drop the ball, like they did, in my opinion, with the Switch, because they have such a great library of games, and yet you have a handful of older Nintendo titles that work on the Switch. It's not like the virtual console of the Wii or the Wii U or whatever. You know what I mean? It's not that level, and they always seem to go back and forward on whether they want to make their history as accessible as possible or whether they want to keep it as restricted as possible and sell you everything
they
like they recently did with
they
want to monetize it, like Super Mario, the anniversary edition that came out, 3D All-Stars or whatever. Like the way that thing was rolled out should have been a huge controversy, in my opinion. Like the fact that they put an arbitrary time limit on it is just crazy. And you could also argue that they didn't do a very good job porting those games over anyway. They could have added more or refined a few things or added a few upgrades to them. And so when it comes to that, I can imagine them shipping this new console, and then suddenly you've got a brand new version of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 4K edition that's going to cost you another 50 quid, or maybe will be bundled in with Breath of the Wild 2 or something like that. Like, to me, as much as I do like Nintendo, they have a bad history with kind of selling you their past library again and again for arbitrary kind of reasons.
It's so weird because they come across as the most friendly, charming, like lovable Pixar of gaming company. But then when you start digging into their like business policies and the different ways that they've handled, even things like when YouTube blew up and they just started copyright claiming everybody, and it was like, no, we're trying to cover your games. Like some of them, in our literal case, we were trying to cover Pokemon. It was Sun and Moon, and they just copyright struck it. And it's like, you gave us this to review. What the hell are you doing? And they managed to like walk that back, and they've changed their policy. But Nintendo have been all over the place behind the scenes in regards to, like I said, business mandates and making sure that they're monetizing stuff as much as possible. 2021 though, as you were mentioning this stuff about like the way that they handled the anniversary collection, this year 2021 has so many big anniversaries for their products and IP, like Donkey Kong and Metroid and Zelda are all this year, which makes me think that they could do like anniversary packages of some of those games, like Donkey Kong Country or like Link to the Past. You could do a whole Zelda collection in 4K like on the new system, and that would sell ridiculously well. Like, I know we already own 7 versions of those games anyway, but not in 4K. So
Scott, the thing is, like, I don't personally, and I would pay for them again. You know what I mean? Because on Switch and Online, sorry, but there are a lot of Nintendo games because this is my first dedicated console that I haven't just borrowed from friends when I was younger. You know what I mean? Or I did own the Switch. I didn't own the Switch. Did own the Wii actually. Sorry. But like, this is the first time like someone like me would get to experience a lot of these games. And to be honest, for as much as I can sit here and say that it's a bad thing to do, like if that's the only way I can easily access these games, I'm going to pay it because they are good. They have such a reputation, and I want to experience them in 4K or whatever on this new system. So in a way that's bad, and in a way it's good that at least I get to experience it in some form. I don't know, man. They're such a strange company because, like you said, the games they make and the approach that they've had is, in a lot of ways, gamer friendly in terms of the content, but also in terms of their business practices. Like, they managed to fly under the radar despite doing some really kind of strange and obtrusive, things to people who either cover games and the people who actually are just fans and buy the games. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they've got every Nintendo fan over time knows this, and it wax and wanes on how much they take advantage of that relationship. Like, they make some of the best games of all time, but you're also boxed into a very specific tunnel or whatever, some sort of boxed tunnel if you want to try and cover them or talk about them or interface with the way that their business works. Like you said, it's just it's a very specific way of doing things. The sad reality is that if they do release these games again, I'll snap them up. Every Nintendo fan will snap them up. You might play Ocarina of Time in 4K for the first time, and that will be something glorious.
It will.
And so, all that stuff is going to roll out the exact way that it sounds like it will. But hopefully, on the hardware side, they can just do the sort of the new bare minimum for the next gen and just make everything run in 4K, make it run nice and smoothly, alongside, the PS5, the Xbox Series consoles. So yes, let us know what you think down in the comments below of the potential new version of the Switch/Aula and what you would want from a next half-step Nintendo system. For now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com.
I've been Josh from WhatCulture.com.
And we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.